What's up? It's your boy D Change coming at ya with another Daily Dave. It's Wednesday, April 1st, 2020. Though being recorded a little bit late as usual. So one thing I've been contemplating about is kind of the immigrant experience slash existence. And what I mean by that is, so my family, I guess you can consider my parents first generation. Both my grandparents, and then my father, as well as my mother, all immigrated here to the States. And then my sisters and I are the second generation, or the first generation to be born on U.S. soil. And so that creates an interesting kind of dynamic in how we like absorb cultural customs, but also how we kind of trace our family back. So what kind of sucks, honestly, is I don't know much about my family prior to my grandparents' generation, or even my grandparents' generation. And that I came to that realization not too long ago. Probably mostly when my latest the latest passing of my mother's side, or my maternal grandfather. Because here's the thing, I only have one grandmother left. And well, she has dementia. So in a way I feel like my grandparents are kind of gone. Right? Like completely. There's no longer the ability to go to them and ask them questions and ask them to tell stories about what their lives were like. And only after realizing that and really thinking about that, or maybe having much more interest in where I come from, did I truly realize the gravity of, in a way, I guess, lost potential. So, but the thing is, like, I guess you can't know something like that, right? So I'm glad that, even though, I guess, better late than never, quote unquote, I am interested in where my family comes from. But I don't know to what extent I want to take that desire, right? My parents are getting older, and at some point they too will no longer be around. And it's dreadful to think of that, but I have noticed that as time has gone on, I have realized more and more that they are also mortal, and that as time goes on, that worry, I think, will only grow larger, purely because there's no stopping death, and the older you get, the higher your chances, etc., right? And so that makes me wonder, how far am I willing to go, or what am I willing to do to kind of tap into perhaps some not so great feelings about the past, right? I think a lot of other immigrant families can empathize with this, or a lot of say American-born Asians can empathize with this feeling of wanting to know where you come from, but realizing that growing up, your parents didn't really tell you a lot about that. And it could be for different reasons. It could be for political reasons, such as regime change that happened in the home country. And the current regime that's in power is, not the one you would consider legitimate, or not the one you're in favor of. It could be because of trauma, you know. Everyone thinks about, or I guess the way we're taught about World War II, it was literally just like, hey, Europe is a mess, and the US has to go and save everyone's butts. But people don't realize that it's called World War II or a World War because a lot more players were actually in the mix. They didn't take the spotlight, so to speak. And I guess they didn't direct the narrative after victory and defeat. But Asia was war torn in a lot of places, and that was a huge reason for the large kind of like refugee populations that expatriated to so many, especially Western countries. Partially because, you know, those countries did win wars or the battles, and partially because there was a perceived like better quality of life, and some of it could have been colonial relations. There's a lot of different reasons for why people left their homes for hopefully greener pastures. And so stuff like that happens, and you know, tons of people are displaced, and everyone sees a different reason for why it happens and what they have to do. And so that's kind of the conflict that I feel like I've been having recently, especially since lately. You know, I am, you know, I shouldn't be ashamed to say I'm Chinese or anything like that, you know. And I've had this realization multiple times in my life, and I found it. I mean, I found it difficult because it's clearly some sort of like identity crisis, so to speak, right? Like, are you American, or are you Chinese? Are you truly American? Are you truly Chinese? Like, you can never be all of them in their quote unquote purest forms simultaneously, right? And that's just part of the whole like Asian American narrative. Stop making fun of my smelly food, all that dumb stuff, right? But yeah, I guess since this is like the third time in my life where I'm kind of having that like revitalization of an admiration of my own culture and its history, I do realize like, hey, you know what? It's dumb to be ashamed of that, and you should be proud of who you are and where you come from. But sometimes you have to ask, is that incompatible with where you are currently, right? I mean, I think there's always going to be that struggle. Here in the States, I feel like if you're from another place, there's always going to be some sort of like, hey, you're foreign, you know, that type of feeling. Maybe not. I think history has shown that the States has treated a lot of migrant populations that way, but it's adapted. I have noticed that, you know, if you came from Western Europe, you're generally more accepted quickly. And then as you spread out to the other parts of the world, you know, over time, that became more and more quote unquote acceptable. Anyway, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I guess going back to what I started with in the beginning, yeah, I'm realizing that if I do want to like learn more about where my family comes from, I don't have that much time, so to speak. You know, I can't. I've always told myself like, oh, I'll put it off. You know, eventually I'll get to it. But to be fair, like, you know, having a pandemic kind of puts things in the perspective. It kind of makes you ask the morbid question of, what if it affects our family, you know? And what if you happen to lose something very precious to you? Kind of by chance, right? You don't get to decide whether that happens or not. I mean, of course, we're taking as many precautions as we can, or we try to. But, there is that feeling of, if it happens, it happens, or so it's a little bit difficult to kind of grasp. And it's helped me kind of put things into perspective, so to speak, right? And what I'm trying to dance around, I guess, is that a project I feel like I've wanted to do for a while is kind of map out our family tree, or at the very least, establish one. Maybe start a digital family tree, and hopefully kind of continue to trace our lineage, I guess, regardless of where we all end up, right? I mean, I don't truly imagine myself wanting to settle down and have a family outside of the States, but I do kind of entertain that idea. I mean, I've already tried to move to a country once, and I wanted to see what that was like, and I legitimately thought about, what would it take to kind of become a permanent resident and to establish a life and a family and all that in a whole nother land, right? But I realized that I already have enough problems thinking about, extended family being in other cities that aren't, within a half-hour drive. And it's tough. It's really tough, There's a lot of factors for why you would want to live in a certain place. So, I don't know. It's just something to think about. I do think that, when this is all over, and hopefully when U.S.-China relations or tensions settle down, and we can all kind of look back at COVID-19 as a blip on the map, hopefully. I would love to, quote unquote, go back to the homeland and see what it has to offer. I mean, I've been there before, but on a tour and when I was much younger, and in a way, I don't think I could have known the significance of that trip during that time. But I'm so glad I did go. Now that I look back on it, I'm so glad I got to see, what it was like over there during that time. But now I'm much more interested in, say, the actual region my parents come from, and potentially even finding like extended family, though, that's a whole nother question of, will we be able to communicate? Will they even care? Like, what's the point? Question mark, right? And sometimes I think that way too, that maybe the easy way out, honestly, is to just kind of forget it all and just accept, hey, you're here now. Your life is here. Your culture is here. That's just the way it's going to be. But something inside me really says that that's not the way I should do things. Like, I guess what I'm saying is I could go full on, what do you call it? Full on assimilation culture, where it's like, just forget about the whole, like, speaking Chinese and upholding customs and stuff like that. You're an American now. Just be an American, right? But something inside me really says, like, I can't let go of, I just can't let go of where my family comes from. At least not until I figure out more about it, right? So, I don't know, it's tough. It's also kind of spawned by how I see, like, the next generation being raised, right? Like my niece. I mean, I'm not gonna say anything in regards to, like, how anyone should raise their kids. I just wonder, though, like, what kind of a world will she live in? And what will we pass on to her, right? So it just makes me wonder. I don't know. So this is something that's been on my mind for a while, definitely. It's been a collection of thoughts. One of them being the mortality of my parents, the mortality of the generation before us, but also our own legacies, right? What are we going to pass on to the next generation? What do I want to pass on to the next generation and potentially my own offspring? And yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough. I think if you were to tell me in my early 20s that these were things you would finally start thinking about when you got older, I would have said, nah, no way, dude. I'm definitely going to be a man-child for the rest of my life. And to be fair, I still do think I'm a man-child, but I'm realizing that these themes and these ideas are becoming much more important to me now. So, yeah. Don't know where else to go with that. Not necessarily implying I'm gonna go try to live in China or that I need to do anything drastic, but if anything, this is something I want to think about a lot more and really flesh it out, because I'm starting to realize that it is very important to me. So, anyway, this was a much more somber Daily Dave, I guess. I guess it was difficult to get out into words. It was harder for me to articulate. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy stream of consciousness thoughts on random stuff like this. But I don't know if you've had thoughts like that in the past or even now. Like, let me know, because I think everyone has a story to tell, and it really is, our individual choices whether or not we want to tell them. So I've realized that I do want to tell a story like that. I do want to tell a story of my family. Just trying to figure out how. So anyway, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Be on the lookout for the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay cool, and yeah, peace out.